Welcome to Moments with Mary Ann. This is your host, Mary Ann Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Valerie Ann Larson Haynes, who's here to share with us her book, Creative Provinces, A New World of Enchanting and Empowered Communities. So what if you could live in real-life Camelot, a restored ancient city, or even Santa's North Pole, all without needing to escape into fantasy? Well, Valerie is here to explore with us the visionary blueprint for turning our wildest and most meaningful dreams into tangible, thriving communities. So Valerie Ann Larson Haynes studied political science at the University of Connecticut and began her career as an officer in the United States Marine Corps, and then as a professional staff member of the United States of Representatives Armed Services Committee. She later became an independent writer, editor, and publisher in the science and arts. So welcome to the show, Valerie Ann Larson Haynes.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your book and the work that you do. Can you share with us what inspired you to write this?
Yes, I certainly can. This has been a lifelong project for me. When I was a child, I loved nature. I lived in, my twin brother and I lived in our family lived in the outskirts of Minneapolis, way out in the wooded areas before it was developed. And we just loved nature and spent all of our time out there. And we also loved the Native Americans, the Sioux, and we would spend time at Camp Kitchicanis watching, among other things, being treated to powwows by the Native Americans out there. And so that was my love, nature and the American Indians. And but my passion, Mary Ann, was every time I got home from being out in the wilderness, I would make drawings of elaborate estates and houses and communities and so forth, of things that I imagined, of good ways of living. And I spent my childhood doing that. And then later, when I was in college, I studied political science, which opened up another type of structure besides buildings. And I put these together, and when I formed Creative Provinces, the ideas of creative organization and how our society works. And that was sort of the genesis of this. I started way back in the 1980s. My husband and I were coming home from visiting my parents in Minnesota, and during that trip, we visited the old family farmstead that my great-grandparents had originally built in the 1880s, and for 60 years they had that farm. This is in South Dakota, actually, and then they lost it during the Depression. And I started thinking, okay, why do people have to lose their farms that they have worked on for decades? And why do Native Americans why does their culture have to be subsumed by the European immigrants? And then I was seeing environmental destruction too, and why did that have to happen? And I realized, being structurally oriented, that there had to be a structure for us to live, by which we could do all the wonderful things that we wanted, and we wouldn't have to. These bad things wouldn't have to happen. So that's when I started the book back in the 1980s, and I've been collecting ideas for it all along.
Wow, what an impressive journey you've been on. And it's interesting.
It's been a lifetime project, yes.
It's definitely a life passion. And one of the things that you mentioned in your book, you talked about like structure is the problem, but it's also the solution. So what do you mean
definitely.
so what do you mean by that, and how does this insight shape the book?
Well, the Creative Provinces structure, the structure that I built for this, is 8 principles, which I describe in detail in the book. And They are. It's based on people connecting their private properties. Now, creative provinces are a type of intentional community, and intentional communities being things like eco-villages or retirement communities or religious communities, nunneries and monasteries and things like that. But creative provinces goes a huge step further. It's saying that okay, we can people with similar visions can align their private properties to create communities. And interestingly, this is what more recently in the last decade or so we've had. I live in rural upstate New York, and the Amish communities have come here, and this is how they work, and they have been hugely successful. They don't buy a piece of property and then everybody moves there. No, each family has their own farm, and so it's their communities are based on private properties, but they're connected. They're aligned as a community with very, very specific rules that they follow to keep the integrity of their vision, to maintain that. They've been hugely successful. So that's a very similar structure to what Creative Provinces is.
In your book, you talk about one of the key principles that Creative Provinces is that it's a real thing rather than the appearance of. Why is
Absolutely.
Why is this distinction so important today?
It's hugely important, especially now that we have these marvelous tools of technology. Beginning back in the 1950s with television, I was in the generation that first grew up on television. I Love Lucy and everything else, and they're wonderful inventions and wonderful tools, but anything done to excess loses its beneficial effect. And we can spend our lives, of course, looking at screens and not participating in real life, doing real things. And so Creative Provinces is a way that we can, one of the principles is getting away from making sure that these tools do not take over our lives, that we use them as tools and not as a substitute for real living.
You also introduced this concept of provincializing. What does that mean?
Well, the definition, Creative Provinces are places where people have connected themselves and their properties together to create a community vision, specifically the creation or reclamation of a unique culture, travelway, industry, or environment. And to provincialize is to establish such a creative province. And provincials are people who are members of such creative provinces. So that's what provincializing means. And there are four types of provinces, creative provinces: transportation and travelways provinces, industry provinces, environment provinces, and cultural provinces. However, creative provinces will probably have all four of those aspects to them, but one will stand out as being the most important, depending on the vision of the people who form them.
So, how can someone start their own province?
Well, the book is divided into three parts, and the third part is how 5 steps to building a creative provinces. So this is quite a full book. The first part goes through the structural aspects. What are the eight principles of creative provinces? And the second part of the book are examples of the 4 types. Many whimsical, some some very simple, some much more elaborate, and so forth. And then the third part of the book are the steps how to build a creative province. And there are 5 steps. And the first and most important is you create your primary vision. What is it you want to create? Maybe you want to create, Santa's North Pole, or ancient Rome, or a Viking community, or Camelot, or a Wild West province with cowboys and open range cattle herding and stuff like that. Or maybe you want to create a protected wilderness area, or maybe you want to revive a stream that has lost its aquatic life, and you want to revive it. There's so many things, but you create your primary vision of what it is you want to do, and then you create supporting visions, which are that further shape your vision. And then the third step is you create rules to protect your vision. For example, let's go back to the Amish a minute. The Amish have very strict rules, and some people, that's awful that that they can't do certain things. No, it's not awful. That's how they protect the vision of their culture, of what they have created. So the rules are very important. And then the fourth step is to accumulate and chronicle your heritage treasures. And your heritage treasures are your costume, your language, your your skills, your animals, and so forth, or the integrity of your environment. You chronicle and accumulate these treasures. And then the fifth step is to activate your creative province with real live activities. In other words, you're not just creating, let's say a medieval province, and then just having meetings or something. No, you're actually having real live, battle reenactments. You're having, real life events. Ancient Rome might have a real battle with the Vikings, for example, or, and not just battle reenactments, but many other types of activities, dances and harvesting and you name it, depending on the type of creative province that you have. You might have a jazz province, an old-time jazz province, and create activities related to having, to performing your work.
The book describes a very powerful sense, and you've kind of gone over this too, for nostalgia, for cultures, eras, and environments. Why do you think people long to return or reinvent the past?
Well, because our heritage is our heritage is comprised of so many aspects of our past. We have our language, our languages, our costumes, our histories, our traditions. These are our treasures, humanity's treasures that people love. And we're seeing them disappear for a variety of reasons, and people want to keep their treasures. So that's why we long for them. And another way that we long for them is we're watching, movies of how life used to be, and we long for the romance of those older times, and we want to know how to get back to it. And we're replacing that longing with films and books. But it would be so nice to actually be able to live our the romance of our heritage cultures. Now, people are doing it all. I mean, people are going to dances. In fact, this weekend there's a wonderful barn dance here in our area, and which I'm hoping to go to. And so people are doing that as much as they can. Creative Provinces is just another way of doing it. Another way of, let's say, the barn raising. That's another thing that people can do in a certain type of creative province where they are bringing back the traditional farms and farm communities.
In your book, you created 8 foundational principles for these communities. Which one do you feel is most often overlooked but essential for success?
All of them are very important. All of those principles. I think living a real life. In today's world, real living, going back to real living and that's principle 2, is probably the most important. There are many ways in which we can do that. So here are just some examples. So in other words, instead of studying ancient history in books and on the computer or in the classroom, with Creative Provinces, we can learn ancient history by living in an ancient city or going to school, let's say, in an ancient city, staying there for several years and speaking its language and living its culture and participating in its events. Instead of factory farms that we see in various places around the country, we could have real pastoral countryside with grazing animals and cowboys on horseback herding cattle. We can go back to that. So real living, there's so many more examples. instead of endangered wildlife languishing in zoos, we can have wildlife thriving in wildernesses and wildlife corridors with zoologists and nature lovers living there who help maintain the wildlife. Now, of course, we do have some of that already, but we can do much more with it. For example, creative provinces can add corridors to already existing wilderness protected areas to expand on these areas.
So, how can creative provinces coexist with current governments or modern cities?
Well, in principle 7 is creative provinces are in a complementary relationship with their sovereign states. So, creative provinces are not sovereign states. They are communities. They are like a community organization, like a neighborhood community organization. Sovereign states are made up of people with all different types of people, and they live in this area for many different reasons. Whereas in creative provinces, the people living there have the same vision, and so they can follow their vision. Whereas when you're in a state, a government, you have to actually make everybody with all these different visions happy. Let's put it this way. Okay, the creative province structure is one in which we can create envisioned communities without having to decide community parameters through our governments. And our governments can thus be freed from trying to deal with the creative visions of their varied populations, and they can instead focus on their primary purpose, which is to protect the sovereignty of their individual citizens through the state's justice system, and by protecting the state boundaries and resources. And so the different roles of the sovereign state governments and the creative provinces have the potential of complementing each other. So, for example, wilderness provinces could add buffer zones and connective lands to already existing national protected wilderness parks, or environmental restoration and preservation provinces have the potential to significantly assist with government environmental projects. Transportation and travelways provinces have the potential of relieving traffic congestion and other transportation problems that the state must deal with. And likewise, state governments can assist creative provinces. For example, a state bicycle trail might join a bicycle province road and expand its reach, or it might, or a state historical park might join a historic province to include its buildings and historic battlefields and programs in that province. So there are many ways that they can work together. Those are just a couple of examples.
Well, thank you for taking the time to share that. And it's interesting.
You're welcome.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're in this world that's so dominated by technology. So how do creative provinces offer a more human-centered alternative?
Well, there are so many ways. But essentially, we are bringing, we need large industries and large organizations and governments to a certain degree, and we need the small ones too. Just like we need the ocean needs its big fish and it needs its little fish. And right now we've got a lot of big fish in our globalist system that are really sort of inching out the smaller fish. And we've got to reinvigorate our small fish and our small businesses, our small farms, our small communities. And this is a huge part of what Creative Provinces is all about. It's a way to do that. It's a way to bring back our family farms. And there are some really great examples here of some of these small communities provinces that we can create. For example, here where I live, we have a lot of small organic dairy farms, just, maybe 40 cows, and they spend their time in pasture. And then we also have a lot of beekeepers. So I'm thinking this would be a really good place to start a province of the land of milk and honey. That's sort of on my. I'm envisioning that probably for some time in the not too distant future. In other words, and then so if we start that, that means that other small organic dairy farmers will tend to relocate here or start here, and same with beekeepers. And pretty soon, this area grows into the land of milk and honey. You see how that goes?
Yes. How clever is that?
Yeah. Another rather charming example, I think, of of a small farm industry province would be a small Three Little Pigs province. Just one whimsical example, where people who want to raise, just who have just small pastures could raise 3 pigs, and then other people, might raise 3 pigs also, and they share their resources to market their products, both the pork and the fat, the leaf lard. That is the best leaf lard for making pies. And then, of course, if someone wanted to raise 5 pigs, they could call it this little piggy, or the 3 little pigs in this little piggy province. Anyway, that's just a whimsical example.
Those are great
there are many
examples.
Others.
Yeah.
But the most charming example, I think, of a creative province is one of the transportation provinces that I can see envisioning for the future is a hot air balloon corridor province, where hot air balloonists, especially in an area where it's conducive, the airflow and so forth is conducive to hot air ballooning, and they form a transportation province where they are. Well, let's see here. I'm just looking at my book, and this example is called Rainbow Balloon Province and Balloon Corridor. Imagine a region where hot air balloons are a primary mode of transportation between distant points. And so in this case, hot air balloon enthusiasts form a rainbow balloon province and balloon corridor dedicated to hot air ballooning. And they have many provincials who live in far-flung places, but there are also some closely grouped provincial properties enabling province hubs to form. And so thus they have a network of hot air balloon airstream pathways among and between these hubs, and also they form some pathways that are fairly reliable for hot air balloon travel between distant points. And I just think this could be so enchanting. I go into more detail on that, but anyway, transportation provinces could be a lot of fun. Travel right today, and this goes back to your previous question. Today we're rushing from place to place. We're rushing from one place where we look at life on a screen, and then we get into a machine and quickly drive or fly or whatever to another place where we then look at life through a screen. Well, maybe what we should be doing is actually traveling by horse or by hot air balloon or by vintage automobile or something. The long, slow way, and making that part of this wonderful experience of life.
Well, what a great adventure that would be.
It certainly would be.
Oh my goodness. Well, and it's interesting because I like how you allow for just this extraordinary amount of flexibility that provinces can overlap and evolve, and even what you call federate. How do you vision this working in real life communities?
Well, the federation province. Well, when provinces form, you'll have small creative provinces in various locations. But if they're similar, let's say, let's go back to the historic provinces. Let's say that there are lots of places around the world that form ancient creative provinces, like ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, Greece, the Holy Land, and so forth. And then they might want to form a federation of ancient provinces. So, in other words, so that the ancient world comes alive again as a group of ancient provinces that are in these different locations. So these federations, or a federation of organic garden provinces, or organic farm provinces, for example, or a federation of horse roads. By federalizing, these creative provinces can assist each other with resources so that they can manifest more completely their vision. I mean, I'm envisioning lots of horse roads, roads dedicated to horse travel, making it much more accessible than it is today. It's very difficult today to travel by horse because of the way our road structure is oriented towards the automobile only, pretty much.
Well, Valerie, and I felt like your book was such not only a great read, but my goodness, we need more people thinking like this. Where can our
Yes.
listeners connect with you and learn more about Creative Provinces?
Okay, well, we have a website, creativeprovinces.com, and I'm going to be starting a blog on that and updating things. I hope at some point in the future to have a podcast of creative provinces around the world, especially the historic and heritage provinces, so that I can be on, talking to, the Roman Senate and find out what they're up to today, and then find out let's find out what King Arthur and Camelot are doing today, and things like that. Or let's find out what the native indigenous tribes in South America are doing, and just keeping in touch with our cultural groups.
Well, Valerie, you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you so much, Mary Ann. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Valerie. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, Creative Provinces. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.